Good evening, America. This is Grant Ellison with breaking news. Authorities have arrested 22-year-old Tyler Robinson in connection with the assassination of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. Robinson was captured after a family member tipped off law enforcement, ending a 2-day manhunt. Utah's governor announced, "We got him," and President Trump said he's confident the suspect is in custody. Tonight you'll hear 4 perspectives: conservative, progressive, centrist, and prophetic, because this tragedy isn't just about one man's crime. It's about the state of our nation, the rise of hatred, and the battle for freedom itself. Don't just watch, engage. Share your thoughts and prayers in the comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep walking through these moments together. Good evening again, America. This is Grant Ellison. And let me tell you, tonight my heart carries 2 weights: the grief of what we lost and the relief of what has been done. On Wednesday, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was struck down by a coward's bullet at Utah Valley University. His voice silenced, his family devastated, his movement wounded. But tonight, just days later, we can say the words that bring at least a measure of strength back to the American people. The suspect is in custody. Authorities arrested 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of Utah after a 2-day manhunt. And they didn't catch him by accident. They caught him because someone in his own circle, a family member, stepped up and tipped off law enforcement. That is courage. That is patriotism. And that is exactly what America needs right now. People who will stand up, even when it's hard, and say, "No more." Let's be clear. This arrest is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of justice. Robinson is booked, but not yet charged. Evidence is still being pieced together. But already we know enough to say this: a young man took it upon himself to silence a voice with violence. He climbed a rooftop, armed with a bolt-action rifle, and from a distance, he fired into a crowd gathered to hear a man speak. That is not protest. That is not dissent. That is terrorism. And when Governor Spencer Cox said, "We got him," those 3 words rang out like a promise. Justice will be done. President Donald Trump said he is confident in this arrest, and so am I. But confidence is not closure. We must follow this through until every ounce of accountability is delivered. I want you to stop and think about where Charlie Kirk was when this happened. He wasn't on a battlefield. He wasn't in a war zone. He was on a university campus, in the middle of America, standing in front of young people to challenge them, to inspire them, to provoke thought. That is supposed to be the safest arena in this country, a place where voices can clash, where ideas can be tested, where truth can be sharpened. Instead, it became a killing ground, and that should terrify every American, no matter your politics. Because if a man cannot stand on a stage and speak without the fear of being targeted by a rifle, then freedom of speech is not safe. And if freedom of speech is not safe, America is not safe. Now let's not lose sight of this. Charlie Kirk was more than a public figure. He was a husband, a father, a son, a friend. Tonight, his family is still grieving. No arrest can bring him back. No court sentence can fill the empty chair at their table. And I want to say this directly to his family. America grieves with you. We honor your loss. We will not forget his life. And to his supporters, to the young people he mentored, to the students he inspired, do not let this moment silence you. Do not let fear take the place of courage. Because if Charlie Kirk's life stood for anything, it stood for speaking boldly, no matter the opposition. Let's talk about how Robinson was caught. It wasn't just the FBI or local police. It was a tip from a family member, passed through a family friend, that gave authorities the lead they needed. Do you realize how powerful that is? In a world where too often people stay silent, someone spoke up. And because they did, justice is one step closer. That's the America I believe in, where communities take responsibility, where citizens refuse to cover for evil, where truth triumphs over fear. But let me be crystal clear. America cannot stop at one arrest. Because Robinson is not just a man, he is a symptom of a nation poisoned by hatred, by extremism, by a culture that tells people the answer to disagreement is destruction. We must confront that culture with strength. We must send the message loud and clear. Political violence has no place in America, and if you dare to take a life for ideology, the full weight of justice will come down on you. Utah has the death penalty, and if Tyler Robinson is proven guilty in a court of law, then I believe the ultimate penalty should be on the table, not out of vengeance, but out of justice. Because when you assassinate a man for his beliefs, you strike at the heart of the republic itself. Charlie Kirk gave his life to a cause. Agree or disagree with him, you cannot deny his impact. He mobilized millions of young conservatives. He challenged universities. He refused to be silent in the face of opposition. And now, even in death, his influence continues. Because this tragedy has forced America to confront a question. Do we believe in freedom enough to protect it? Do we believe in free speech enough to defend it, even for voices we dislike? If the answer is yes, then we must rise up. We must stand taller, speak louder, and refuse to bow to fear. Because if Charlie Kirk's death silences us, then the assassin wins twice. We have been here before. Lincoln, Kennedy, King, leaders struck down by bullets. Every time America faced a choice, collapse in fear or rise in unity. We must rise again, because every assassination is not just a crime against a person, it is a wound against democracy. And the only way to heal that wound is with courage, with unity, with resolve. So what do we do now? We stand. We demand justice for Charlie Kirk. We protect the right to speak freely. We honor the courage of those who tipped off law enforcement. We reject the culture of hate that fueled this act. And above all, we choose courage over fear. Because America cannot survive if silence is forced at the barrel of a gun. Tonight, Tyler Robinson is behind bars. But America's work is not finished. We must see justice carried out. We must ensure this never happens again. And we must honor Charlie Kirk's life by carrying forward his courage. America, let me leave you with this. Freedom is fragile. It survives only when we defend it. And if we want to keep the republic, if we want to keep free speech, if we want to keep our children safe to think and to speak, then we must not bow to violence. Charlie Kirk's life mattered. His death matters. And now, our response matters most of all. This is Grant Ellison, reminding you. Stand tall, speak boldly, and never let a coward's bullet decide the future of America.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in tonight. This is Maya, and as I sit here, my heart feels a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the life we've lost, and relief that the man suspected of taking that life has been arrested. Authorities announced the capture of Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old Utah man, in connection with the assassination of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. The arrest came after a 2-day manhunt, and it happened because someone close to him, a family member, found the courage to speak up. Let's pause on that for just a moment. In the midst of chaos, in the shadow of violence, it was not a politician or a pundit who brought us to this moment. It was an ordinary person making an extraordinary choice. A family member who refused to stay silent. That one act of courage turned the tide, and to me, that is where the lesson begins. It is no small thing to turn in someone you know. It is no small thing to make a phone call that could destroy your own peace of mind, your own family ties, your own reputation. But someone did it. Someone said, "I can't let this stand." That decision, painful, costly, difficult, has now brought relief to a grieving family, confidence to a shaken community, and accountability to a nation demanding answers. So tonight, as we talk about politics, justice, and prevention, let's not forget to honor the courage of that person. They remind us that accountability does not just rest in the hands of government, it rests in the conscience of everyday people. Grant spoke of justice, and he's right. Justice matters. But before we talk courts, penalties, or laws, let's talk about people. Charlie Kirk's family is grieving. His wife has lost a husband. His children have lost a father. His parents have lost a son. And nothing about today's arrest changes that. No booking photo, no statement from the governor, no FBI press conference will erase their pain. And what about the students who were in that courtyard? Young men and women who thought they were attending a speech, a chance to hear ideas, to ask questions, maybe even to be inspired. Instead, they witnessed violence. They heard a rifle crack. They saw a man collapse. They ran for their lives. That trauma doesn't go away when the suspect is caught. That trauma lives on in memories, in nightmares, in the questions they will carry for years. Am I safe anywhere? So while today's arrest matters for justice, we must not mistake it for healing. Healing will take longer. Healing will take compassion. Healing will take a nation willing to look at itself honestly. Because here's the truth. Tyler Robinson is not just an individual. He is a product of an environment where political hatred festers, an environment where words of demonization turn into acts of destruction, an environment where people begin to see opponents not as neighbors to debate, but as enemies to eliminate. That environment is killing us, literally, and unless we confront it, this will happen again. I am not excusing Robinson. He must be held accountable for his choices. But accountability does not stop at the courtroom. Accountability also means asking ourselves, how did we get here? How do we stop producing more Robinsons? We cannot ignore the weapon. Reports say Robinson used a bolt-action rifle from a rooftop. A weapon designed for precision, fired from a distance, aimed at a man who had no chance to defend himself. How did that weapon end up in his hands? How do we continue to allow dangerous weapons to be accessible to those who would use them not for sport, not for defense, but for murder? Every time we ignore that question, we make space for the next tragedy, and every time we shrug it off, we betray the families who will sit in grief tomorrow. But weapons aren't the only danger. Words are too. We live in an age where rhetoric is escalating, where leaders and influencers paint their opponents not as people with ideas, but as monsters, villains, traitors. And when that kind of language saturates the air, it creates an atmosphere where extremists feel justified in pulling the trigger. It is not enough for leaders to condemn violence after the fact. They must also speak responsibly before violence happens. We can't say, words don't matter. Words move people. Words inspire. Words mobilize. And yes, words radicalize. So let's hold our leaders accountable, not just for their policies, but for their language. Because language shapes culture, and culture shapes action. Now I will say this. I am encouraged that leaders from both parties condemned the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That matters. It tells us that there is still one line America is unwilling to cross. And in a time of division, even that small agreement gives me hope. But words of condemnation must be followed by action. If we truly mean that political violence is unacceptable, then we must do the hard work to prevent it. And prevention is not partisan. It is not conservative or progressive. It is human. I want to say something personal here. I disagreed with Charlie Kirk, often, sometimes passionately, but disagreement is not enmity. Opposition is not hatred. Charlie Kirk deserved to live. He deserved to come home to his family. He deserved to grow old. And his death is not just a conservative loss. It is a human loss. So tonight, I choose to grieve not as a progressive, not as a commentator, but as a fellow human being. And I invite all of you, whether you leaned right, left, or center, to do the same. So, where do we go from here? We act. We act by holding Robinson accountable through the justice system. We act by addressing the culture of hate that breeds violence. We act by examining our laws and policies to keep weapons out of dangerous hands. We act by lowering the temperature of our rhetoric. We act by choosing compassion across divides, Because if we don't, then today's relief will be temporary and tomorrow's headline will be another tragedy. So yes, I am relieved that Tyler Robinson is in custody. I am grateful for the family member who had the courage to speak up. I am thankful that law enforcement acted quickly. But I will not call this closure, because closure does not come with an arrest. Closure comes when America stops producing more hate, more division, more violence. Closure comes when families don't have to bury loved ones for their beliefs. Closure comes when students don't have to run from gunfire on their campuses. That's the America I long for. That's the America I believe we can build. But it will not happen by accident. It will happen when we decide that life matters more than ideology, that humanity matters more than division, that compassion matters more than hatred. This is Maya, and I will leave you with this. If we don't change course, we will keep repeating this cycle of grief. But if we choose love, if we choose compassion, if we choose to see each other's humanity, then maybe, just maybe, Charlie Kirk's death will not be in vain.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Maya. And good evening, America. This is Jordan Lee, and as I sit here tonight, I feel both the weight of tragedy and the glimmer of relief. The tragedy is obvious. Charlie Kirk is gone, struck down by an assassin's bullet at Utah Valley University. The relief is that the man suspected of this heinous act, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, is now in custody. After a 2-day manhunt, after fear and uncertainty, we can at least breathe a little easier knowing the suspect has been found. But let's be clear, while the arrest marks a turning point, it is not the finish line. Justice is still ahead, and America has hard questions to face. First, let's recognize what happened here. Law enforcement, aided by a courageous family member who spoke up, tracked down, and arrested Robinson. The governor of Utah announced it with 3 words: "We got him." And yes, those words bring a measure of reassurance. But an arrest is not a conviction. An arrest is not closure. An arrest is simply the doorway to justice. It means a community can exhale, but it also means a family. Charlie Kirk's family is still waiting for the full measure of accountability. We must allow the system to work. Robinson must face trial. Evidence must be presented. Justice must be pursued with integrity. That's how democracy functions, not through vengeance, but through due process. But here's where I want to focus. Robinson's alleged act was not just a crime against Charlie Kirk and his family. It was a crime against democracy itself. Because in America, we do not settle political disagreements with rifles. We do not decide which voices get to speak by silencing them with bullets. We do not allow assassins to dictate the boundaries of free speech. When someone climbs a rooftop and opens fire on a speaker, they are not just attacking a person. They are attacking the very principle that keeps this country free, the right to speak, to gather, to disagree without fear of violence. And if we forget that, if we reduce this to simply one more tragedy in a long list, then we miss the deeper danger. Like Maya said, there is a family grieving tonight. There are students who witnessed horror. There are young people who will carry trauma long after the cameras leave. And like Grant said, there is a nation asking whether free speech can still be safe in America. Both of those realities are true. Both matter. And a centrist perspective requires us to hold both truths together. We must care for the human cost, and we must guard the democratic principle. One detail in this story strikes me deeply. Robinson was caught because of a family member's tip. Think about that. Law enforcement didn't just stumble upon him. A relative spoke up. A relative said, "This is wrong. I can't stay silent." That act of courage matters. It tells us that even in a time of division, ordinary people can still make extraordinary choices. It reminds us that accountability begins at home, in communities, in the everyday decisions to do what's right, even when it's painful. We should honor that, and we should also ask, How can we empower more people to do the same? How can we create a culture where silence in the face of evil is no longer acceptable? Now, Grant demanded justice, and he is right. Maya called for prevention, and she is right too. The truth is, we need both. Justice after the fact is essential. Robinson must face consequences. The law must show that America will not tolerate political violence. But prevention before the fact is just as vital, because accountability after a murder does not bring back the dead. So how do we prevent? We prevent by lowering the temperature of our rhetoric. We prevent by refusing to demonize opponents as enemies. We prevent by addressing the pathways to extremism. And yes, we prevent by asking hard questions about how weapons get into the wrong hands. None of these conversations are easy, but if we avoid them, then Robinson will not be the last name we learn. I also believe leaders carry a unique responsibility here. When leaders escalate their language, when they inflame divisions, when they treat opponents as villains to be destroyed rather than people to be debated, they contribute to the climate that fuels violence. Words matter. Words shape culture, and culture produces action. If we want to stop seeing rifles on rooftops, we must stop excusing reckless rhetoric from platforms and podiums. That doesn't mean silencing strong voices. It means demanding responsibility from those voices. Here is my concern. In the days ahead, partisanship will tempt us. Some will want to use this tragedy to score points against the left. Others will want to distance themselves to dismiss Kirk's death as an isolated event. Both are mistakes. This is not about left or right. This is about right and wrong. And if we cannot see that, then we are already losing. Because the truth is, political violence doesn't belong to one side. If today it's Charlie Kirk, tomorrow it could be someone else. Progressive, centrist, conservative, violence doesn't respect party lines. It respects only chaos. And the only way to confront it is together. History shows us where unchecked violence leads. In countries where political assassinations become normalized, democracy dies, trust collapses, fear takes root. America has walked that line before. Lincoln, Kennedy, King, and each time we had to decide whether to crumble or to unite. We must choose unity again. Not superficial unity, not ignoring our differences, but real unity. The kind that says, we can disagree fiercely, but we will not kill each other for it. So where does this leave us? Between Grant's call for justice and Maya's call for compassion, there is balance. Justice without compassion becomes cruelty. Compassion without justice becomes weakness. But justice with compassion, that's how nations heal. And if America is going to heal from this, we must walk that balanced road. Charlie Kirk's family is still grieving. Tyler Robinson is behind bars. America is still reeling. But this is not the end of the story. The end of the story will be written by how we respond. Will we allow violence to divide us further? Or will we allow this tragedy to remind us of our shared humanity, our shared democracy, our shared responsibility? Grant called us to strength. Maya called us to compassion, and I call you tonight to balance. Balance that protects freedom without sacrificing safety. Balance that pursues justice without forgetting mercy. Balance that sees political opponents not as enemies, but as fellow citizens. Because if we lose that balance, we will keep losing lives. And if we keep losing lives, we will eventually lose the Republic itself. This is Jordan Lee, reminding you, America will only survive if we remember that ballots, not bullets, decide our future. And that every voice, even the ones we disagree with, has the right to be heard without fear of assassination.
Family, you've heard Grant demand justice, Maya call for compassion, and Jordan seek balance. All of that matters. But as I look at what's happening in America, I see something deeper. a spiritual battle breaking into the open. Charlie Kirk's life was stolen by a bullet. Today, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson sits in custody as the suspect. He thought he could hide in the woods, but Luke 8:17 reminds us, "Nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known." Robinson ran, but God exposed him. This is more than crime, it is demonic. John 10:10 says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." That spirit has been prowling America, stealing innocents in schools, killing worshipers in churches, silencing leaders on campuses. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness." Robinson is flesh and blood. The real enemy is Satan, who delights in division and destruction. These tragedies are not isolated. Children shot in a Catholic mass in Minneapolis, a conservative leader assassinated at a university, innocence, faith, and leadership under fire. The enemy's pattern is clear. Target the foundations, weaken trust, spread fear. If America does not wake up spiritually, we will keep treating symptoms while missing the root, sin, and spiritual wickedness. Even so, God left us a sign. Robinson was captured because a family member tipped off police. Imagine that courage, to speak against your own blood. That act is prophetic. It shows us what the church must do. We cannot cover sin. We cannot hide darkness. Judgment begins at the house of God. 1 Peter 4:17. Families and the family of faith must bring truth into the light. Yes, government will prosecute Robinson, but the church must fight differently. In prayer, in intercession, in holiness. We must declare Psalm 91 over this nation. "He is my refuge and fortress, my God, in whom I trust." And we must guard our own tongues. Too often believers mirror the world's hatred, but people are not the enemy. Satan is. If we forget that, we fight the wrong battles. Jesus warned in Matthew 12:25, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation." America is fractured. Political hatred is boiling over. Robinson's bullet didn't just kill a man, it aimed to widen the gap, to pit American against American. If we let that happen, then we are playing into the devil's hand. Some ask, where is God's justice? It's here. The suspect was exposed. Darkness was dragged into the light. That is God at work. But ultimate justice belongs to him alone. Charlie Kirk's blood has not been ignored. God heard it. And in his timing, justice will be complete. It's easy to despair. But remember, the darkest day in history was the day Jesus died on the cross. Evil thought it had won. But 3 days later, the grave was empty. If God turned Calvary into resurrection, he can turn America's mourning into awakening. So I declare, hidden things will keep being revealed. Political violence will not define America's future. The church will rise in intercession. The blood of the innocent will not go unanswered, and Jesus Christ will still have the final word. Isaiah 61 calls, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." That's the invitation to America. Rise from hatred, rise from fear, rise from division. Charlie Kirk's voice is silent, but truth is not. Tyler Robinson is in custody, but the real enemy still prowls. America is shaken, but God is not shaken. Grant called for strength. Maya called for compassion. Jordan called for balance. And I call you to faith, because faith anchors us when nothing else makes sense. This is Elias Grant, reminding you, assassins may hide, but they cannot escape God's justice. Darkness may strike, but the light of Christ still shines, and his kingdom will never end.
Family justice has begun with Tyler Robinson's arrest, but Charlie Kirk's family still mourns, and healing will take time. Share your prayers and thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep facing these moments together. This is Maya, reminding you, justice is vital, but only love brings healing.